The assaults by Hamas launched on Israel in October 2023 were some of the worst terrorist atrocities ever recorded. But the reaction of the political left and a wide swath of Islam were almost as disturbing. In cities all across the world, thousands swarmed into the streets to celebrate the murder of Jewish babies. Many of those mocked the suffering of the Israelis and screamed that we should gas the Jews. And this shocking reaction continued online. The socialist worker rejoiced at how Palestinian resistance had humiliated racist Israel. And BLM showed their true colours too. I warned about the anti-Semitism of this movement years ago, and several factions overtly celebrated the vile attacks against civilians. The wider left, of course, fell back on the old line that the attack was justified, because Israel was asking for it. Maggie Chapman, of the Scottish Nationalists, sneered that what's happened in Palestine is in consequence of apartheid, of illegal occupation, and of imperial aggression by the Israeli state. To her, it was Gaza that was under attack. It wasn't terrorism. It was decolonisation. Rivka Brown, of Novara Media, went even further. She claimed that today should be a day of celebration for supporters of democracy and human rights worldwide, as Gazans break out of their open-air prison and Hamas fighters cross into their colonisers' territory. The struggle for freedom is rarely bloodless, and we shouldn't apologise for it. To her credit, Ilhan Omar did condemn the attacks. But when Rashida Tlaib was repeatedly asked to condemn Hamas, she refused. So did the Democratic representative Tim Hernandez, in a film that he claimed would be seen by 3 people. It currently has 10 million views. Jeremy Corbyn was also repeatedly asked to condemn Hamas. He refused, but he did condemn the occupation. When asked to condemn Hamas, he instead blamed it on the Israelis. He blamed it on the Jews. David Lammy and Upsama Begum also posed for photographs to show their solidarity with Palestine. And basic decency suggests that they could have picked a better time. Najma Sharif was another of many who gloated. What did you think decolonisation meant? Vibes? Papers? Essays? Clearly people who object to the indiscriminate butchery of babies are losers. Ash Sarkar had plenty to say. In reference to Israel, she sneered at the suggestion that responsibility for committing war crimes rests with someone other than the perpetrator. But of course, when it comes to Palestine, that's exactly what she thinks. Responsibility for their war crimes rests with Israel, with the occupation. If Israelis want safety, they should simply surrender to Palestinian aggression. Naturally, Jeremy Vine gave her a platform on the BBC to spout this drivel. Search high and low on Sarkar's feed and you will find no condemnation of the Hamas attack. But you'll find reams of damning indictments of the Israelis, either written by her or reposted by her. And that same old theme crops up time and time again. Israeli actions have prompted this. These attacks were caused by Israeli policy. They're due to the occupation. According to Sarkar, Israel was asking for it. Owen Jones, to his credit, did outright condemn the attacks by Hamas, but he had much more to say about the Israeli retaliation, and he too fell back on the old trope that Palestinian aggression has been driven by Israeli occupation. He was quick to make a film called Palestinian Lives Matter, but I'm not holding my breath for a counter-film called Jewish Lives Matter. Like Sarkar, Jones didn't just post his own comments, he shared those of others, but only ones from his own echo chamber, all singing from the same song sheet, all condoning rather than condemning Hamas, all pointing the finger firmly at the Jews. In doing so, These activists have failed to consider their own role. The political left has demonised Israel and Zionism for generations, and they've continued to give tacit support to the violent examples of Palestinian nationalism, whether the PLO, Fatah, or Hamas. All are romanticised, excused, given a whitewash, like some kind of latter-day Robin Hoods. But in doing so, what the left refuse to accept is that they have enabled this conflict. The blame lies not with the Israeli occupation, a policy driven by the insatiable bloodlust of their neighbours. The blame lies with them. The likes of Corbyn and Ash Sarkar claim to oppose this conflict, but the reality is they have helped galvanise it, soothed its progress, rolled out the red carpet so Hamas are widely seen as oppressed victims rather than the deranged, racist murderers, which is all they are. Now look, expressing sympathy for the plight of the Palestinians is fine, as is vocalising caution at the extent of Israeli reprisals. We'd all like to see a peaceful solution here, though it's easy to say that, removed from the reality of the conflict as we are. What I'd like to do, though, is to address the repeated claims that Palestinian violence is justified because of the Israeli occupation. Because this simply isn't true. The occupation hasn't caused Palestinian violence. The occupation was caused by Palestinian violence. It was the Palestinians, along with their Arab neighbours, who attacked Israel in 1948, 1967, 1973, and ever since, through wave after wave of terrorist assaults. It's always been the Arabs who provoked the violence, and Israeli strength has only ever been shown, as here, in retaliation. It's Palestinian hatred and violence that prolongs this conflict, that endangers Palestinian children. But this is never mentioned, let alone criticised by the radical left. The occupation only happened as a result of, and as a shield against, that aggression. Were the violence to stop, then the occupation would end. And we have direct historical evidence to prove this. In response to Egyptian violence, the Israelis previously occupied the Sinai Peninsula, an oil-rich region twice the size of Israel itself. But when the Egyptians abandoned their campaign, forswore violence against the Jewish state, and recognised Israel's right to exist, then that occupation ended. Immediately. The entire Sinai was returned to Egypt. And the same would happen here. The fact is, the Palestinians have been offered their own state several times. They have refused it on every occasion and opted for violence instead. Then they and their asinine supporters have whined about the consequences. If the left truly want to see peace in the region, then they can ask the Israelis to end the occupation, but they must also ask the Palestinians to pursue peace, because one cannot come without the other. They should be calling on Hamas to lay down their arms, to seek negotiations, to pursue the path of peace. But they never will. They don't look to end Palestinian violence. They don't seek to curtail the slaughter. They just seek to excuse and justify it, as they have repeatedly done here. And they refuse to accept that they have any role in that slaughter. But the fact is, until they change tack, children and civilians will keep getting killed on both sides. And the blood is on their hands too. If you want to support this channel, please like and subscribe. And if you're interested in these topics, I've written 2 books which go into them in extensive detail. They're called The Tyranny of the Left, and they're available on the links below. Please do feel free to pick them up and let me know what you think. Thank you.